we could have done like a meme coin launch. Like seriously, like we could have done that, right?
Bring on-chain to users rather than forcing them to go the other way around.
All right, Kain, the DJs just want to know when they can trade, man.
It's not just like, oh, I missed out. Good luck to them. It's like they must die.
Is Infinex just like the ultimate on-chain aggregator, or is that just bad marketing? Welcome back to the roll-up. For today's episode, we are going to do a deep dive into Infinex with Kain and Jed. A lot of you guys probably know Kain is the OG of synthetics. If you were alongside us in DeFi summer, getting that C ratio as close to 500% as possible, like many of us were. Kain is calling in from Sydney, as well as Jed. Jed is the CTO of Infinex, previously with background in software design, and has worked in crypto for some time as well. So today's pod is going to be kind of a mix of the technicals and the strategies about Infinex, and the broader market of chain abstraction, as well as DeFi. So guys, thank you for coming on. Pleasure to have you guys here. And yeah, looking forward to this.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
Good to be here.
For sure. So Kain, I remember earlier this year we were at that rooftop party in Brussels, talking about kind of the journey of DeFi. And I think one of the main points that I had made was we're kind of on this period of time here where we had a lot of these 0 to 1 innovations in DeFi summer, things like synthetics, Aave, AMMs, and then it really got pretty degenerate quickly. And then we were kind of at this point for the last like 18 months or so where I think a lot of people are pretty excited about what's possible with these solutions, but also at the same time, kind of like wondering when the next kind of big breakthrough is. And so we were kind of having this conversation about Infinex with this goal about, okay, the goal is to go after the users on centralized exchanges, not really focused on net new users to crypto, right? If we can't kind of bring that user base from Binance and those exchanges on chain, then we don't really have much business going after the other non-crypto natives per se.
Bank of America and Citibank clients are probably pretty safe, right? If we can't take that finance.
Yeah. So like, how did you guys come up with this like market segment and mental model for Infinex to kind of like siphon off the liquidity from Binance per se? And is this still kind of like your North Star?
I think it is, although it's evolved, right? Like
Okay.
the starting point was we have good, and even back in July of this year when we were chatting about this, I was still kind of discovering in real time this approach, right? And I think we've landed on something now that from like it's internally consistent and coherent. What's interesting though is the end state of the approach that we've got now is actually not 100% compatible with like the architecture that we've built today. And so, Jed and I have been spending a lot of time with the other people in the tech side of the project, working through like what should stay from our original thesis and what shouldn't, right? And the original thesis was like, we have good execution engines, no one's using them, let's bring them to people by whatever means necessary, right? And if that means like building a centralized wrapper around them, cool, right? But we've seen this is effective. Like Hyperliquid kind of did this, right? It's just a centralized, decentralized. It's CDFi or something like that, right? And so it does work, and it is better, but it's not sufficient. And so this journey of discovery of like what will it actually take to replace Binance with on-chain applications or with an on-chain application that uses on-chain execution, has been quite the journey. And I think we're there now. I think we know what it will take. And now we're ready to build it, understanding what that looks like. And so we're really trying to think through this kind of, these architectural challenges, like what is important and what is maybe something that's just going to hold us back, I guess.
Yeah. So the vision was kind of a reflection of the original idea, and then essentially through the building that you guys saw that vision evolve with the technical challenges or just the idea of what infrastructure kind of needed to build this vision for taking down Binance. And I think it's like a vampire attack on Binance, but for the betterment of everybody within the space. And I'm curious if you think like there's actually like what is the user profile of a Binance user compared to like an on-chain user, in your opinion? Is there a stark difference there?
I think there's quite a difference, right? Like, there's a lot of people who are Binance users that migrated off of like Bitfinex or Kraken or like older exchanges, and a lot of times they just have their assets in Binance. They've just got like a bunch of Bitcoin or Litecoin or XRP or whatever. I think the on-chain audience tends to be more active and more degen. But one thing that has been really interesting to notice is that like over time, people tend to get less active on chain, which is kind of crazy, right? If you talk to like the DeFi summer OGs, most of them don't transact on chain all the time anymore. It's sad, right? And so why is that? Like, what's the reason? I think there are a bunch of reasons, but one of the reasons is that you learn over time how risky it is every time you click a button. And, so you try to optimize for clicking less buttons. And so I think that, there are a lot of people who would do more stuff on chain if it were easier, right? But also we need to get better at doing things on chain. There's people who have assets to deploy on chain that are maybe not deployed, or maybe they're sitting idle-ish, right? Like they're in Aave, as an LP. But they could be in something newer, or they could be in, some split between Aave and, some like Pendle thing, or, but they're just not going around looking for the opportunities the way they were. This is where Infinex can also help, right? By, presenting those opportunities in a way that is, safer, helping with discovery, helping, with distribution, helping with access, and education. So as new things evolve, as new protocols emerge, we can make it easier for people to try them out. Because it's a lot of effort, as we know, right? It was a full-time job to keep up with everything that was happening in DeFi summer, and there's an order of magnitude more stuff today than there was then.
I think just sort of adding on to that, you've got this situation where the space of fraud and attacks and all this kind of stuff is like, it's getting a lot more sophisticated, and not just in crypto, it's getting more sophisticated across the board, sort of in TradFi and other areas as well. And so everyone's becoming a lot more inhibited. One of the interesting things that we've observed as we've been working on this UX angle of Infinex is like, crypto generally is kind of designed in a way to make you think and to make you worry. And that's quite deliberate. Like that's part of the whole self-custody story if you go back. But it's kind of not how we get net new users into the ecosystem. And I don't think it's how Binance and the other centralized exchanges have brought users in either. They've really made themselves feel a lot more like my net bank than like my Trezor. Right. So there's kind of this almost education or mindset gap, which I think is forming part of how we're looking at giving people something that is more familiar, but actually has the transparency and the security of genuinely being on chain.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, to that point, part of the issue that Kain was referring to as well ties into that, where in DeFi summer we were all on Ethereum L1, right? And so it was very easy to be interacting with every protocol with just a couple clicks. There was no bridging, there was no L2s and these types of things. And I mean, I think I had like multiple tens of thousands transaction count in 2020, 21. And I'd be lucky to get like 100 transactions a month these days, if not like 50, right? And I'm using the tech, but it's mostly stable coins, right? It's mostly payments. It's mostly sending out salaries, sending out payments to vendors. And even still, it's like, do you send it on Arbitrum, or do you do it on this L2 or Ethereum, or is it some people want Solana USDC now? And so I think this combination of the expansion of Ethereum per this roll-up centric roadmap has also contributed. And I think this is like takes me to the interesting point that I wanted to touch on with this kind of idea, this chain abstraction thing, Jed, that you were hitting on, right, with security and just kind of ease of UX. I think this notion of chain abstraction will play a strong role in the upcoming future of the UX, and it's recently garnered a lot of attention. But I still think like what we're building in these chain abstraction world is like a lot of like universal accounts for wallets, or like one wallet to access all these chains, or like things like AgLayer and Elastic Chain, which really help on the infra side. So I'm seeing a lot of like this infra being proposed as this solution to fragmentation. But when in reality, it seems like the biggest breakthrough to make this idea of like chain abstraction tangible is actually through like an app. And so like from your perspective, what is the correct way to think about Infinex? Is it an app or is it infrastructure, and kind of like what's the right mental model for Infinex?
I mean, Infinex is an app, like hands down. That is the space that we're playing in. We're absolutely building what we're building on the shoulders of giants. Like a lot of people have spent a lot of energy over the last decade turning crypto generally, like L1s, L2s, all of the side stuff, like MPC networks on the side of a chain to implement stuff like cross-chain signatures. All of this stuff is really important at a technical infrastructure layer. But to close the loop on making people safe when they use it, we need to go to where users are, and that is in apps. So Infinex from that perspective is an app, and because it's an app, like if you look at Binance, that is the best. Kain said this in other places. That's the best cross-chain technology we've ever seen. You don't know about the existence of different chains. You want some Bitcoin, you want to swap that into WIF, it just happens, right? You got some USDC, you don't know where that USDC is. It doesn't matter. Now that's all running in a database, which is not our goal. I think to take crypto seriously, it can't become centralized and only run in a database in order to be in a way that people can actually use it intuitively and interact with it. But that's basically the end state. Binance have been there for a while. Our job is to get DeFi there and bring those users on chain. What that means is, at the end of the day, like all of the networks are kind of competing on different features or functionality. Like some are fast, some are cheap, some are both, some are neither. Some are really safe. Like Ethereum is very, very decentralized in a way that I don't know that any other like sort of smart chain is really going to compete with that. Like these are all good things, and depending on what kind of application you're building, some are more important than others, right? And like I personal view, it's really good that we've got all of these things happening. We've got all these tools at our disposal, but as a user, just in the last couple of weeks, I've interacted on like Blast is fine. I can use that with my current wallet, but I've got to go find a bridge. I've got to connect my Trezor over here, but then I'm on Solana and I can't use my Trezor there. If I'm going to interact with a dApp, I've got to have a ledger as well. Like there's all these weird corners, and then you get the stuff like Near, and now I need to go create a Near wallet. Like this isn't education, I think, that actually helps people use DeFi. So part of our goal is to be able to build an application that solves people needing to know that, but behind the scenes is able to operate across chains. And that's kind of the role, like in our architecture, that's the role of our Infinex platform, is to understand that on behalf of the user and to be able to sort of implement cross-chain functionality on behalf of people.
Got it.
In terms of how we get there, I think it looks like there are sort of two main answers at the moment. And one of those might be, like, there's a bit of work that's being done. We're actually using Wormhole CCQ to synchronize state across chains. And that's kind of one almost philosophical approach to implementing cross-chain functionality. And then the other one is this idea that we're going to end up with some chains that act more like control planes for functionality that is actually running on other chains. And that's where I think there's also some really interesting stuff happening in that direction. So at Infinex, we're actually working. I imagine that there will continue to be a valid use case for both of these different approaches to sort of solving the problems that living in a multi-chain sort of world actually presents.
Yeah. I think that's aligned with my mental model. I'm curious to understand how you guys think about this and where Infinex fits in. So my general take here for the next 6, 12, 18 months is basically we'll have these intent-based interoperability solutions in the immediate term, facilitating cross-chain transactions by basically market makers, solvers, same thing. Sub 1 second, sub 2 seconds, even hopefully sub 200 milliseconds or somewhere around there. We'll have users interacting with DeFi on-chain in this experience that's almost like when you interact with your web browser. So right now I've got Riverside, Google Meet, Twitter, Hypefury, StreamYard. I kind of just click around on these apps without needing to really change my wallet, change my chain, change my assets. I can use my assets on all of these chains in this kind of app-centric perspective. And I use blockchains in the sense that I have my list of my favorite applications that I use where my assets are stored, whether it's social, whether it's, a community app, etc. And I basically rely on these as like bookmarks in my browser. Eventually we get to a place where there's better coordinated block building, shared sequencing, ZK proof aggregation that makes this kind of like completely synchronous. I think in the immediate term, it's more on the intent side underneath. So interoperability is powered by this like chain abstracted UX with one wallet or account that is able to access all of your assets across all blockchain networks. Is this kind of like the right way to think about it? And if so, or if not, how does Infinex either change that or play a part in that?
Yeah, I think that is the right way to think about it. I mean, the browser is an interesting analogy, right? Imagine if you went to Facebook and you had to somehow get yourself into the data center that was running it. Right? And then you went to Google and you had to like figure out how to get into Google's data center in order to use Gmail. Like that's kind of where we've got users at the moment in crypto, right? And so people would do it, particularly the enthusiasts would do it.
The data centers have their own browsers, right? And so it's like you got to download the like GCP browser to be able to like run, it's crazy, the fragmentation.
I think we need an app that can just bring on-chain to users rather than forcing them to go the other way around, which is our goal with Infinex. But then what we've started talking more about is this idea where you also need to be able to have the user sort of have the app follow the user, right? So like the other thing that you mentioned a bunch of social apps, and they all actually interrupt with each other these days. You can use your Facebook account to log into something. You can use your Gmail account to log into something. You can get your Gmail account connected to your operating system. Like everything kind of works everywhere. So that's also folding into our vision of kind of like, yes, we can and will build on-chain Binance, but what then? Like, what about the sort of weird corners of DeFi? What about like people's creativity outside of just the parts that we're building in Infinex? How do we kind of join all this together? Get that really nice UX just everywhere, as well as the safety that comes along with that.
Do you think that there is an aspect of this interop game or this chain abstraction, account abstraction game that is still anchored in the old way of doing things, right? Like it's still anchored in the old way of like, all of the important things must be on chain. And this has been one of the interesting kind of interplays, I think, between Jed and I. I've got all these ideas of like how, protocol should be built and what is important from a security standpoint, et cetera. And some of it is important and some of it isn't. And teasing out which are the parts that are important and some of the parts that are not important are actually huge blockers to doing things well, to giving users good UX, right? So what, like one of the best examples of this is like censorship resistance, right? Censorship resistance in DeFi right now is like a grand lie. None of the dApps are censorship resistant, right? They're Larping is censorship resistant. Like, you might have like an IPFS instance of Curve, pinned somewhere, but like the vast majority of people are using the current Curve interface. And like, good luck if that pinned version of Curve actually works properly against the current contracts with all of the different vaults. Like my guess is it probably doesn't, right? Or it's reliant on the graph or something like that, right? It's a lot of sleight of hand. And we sort of were forced into that saying like, okay, we're doing our best now and we're going to get better over time, but we haven't gotten better over time. And it's actually optimizing for the wrong thing, right? Like what we should be optimizing for is a system that is non-custodial, but is not necessarily censorship resistant. Because if you optimize for censorship resistance and trade off that for bad UX, you will never get the demand. And the demand side is how you actually prevent censorship. Get enough people to care about your thing and it becomes much harder to censor, right? So build great UX and lean into that, which all of a sudden, if your North Star is UX and it's not censorship resistance, there's a whole bunch of things you can drop off. There's still things you can't, like you can't just go YOLO, we're going to be custodial because then you're Binance, right? So you don't want to end up at the same place. But there's a thing somewhere between, DeFi maximally censorship resistance over here, Binance custodial and censorable is here. There's a hybrid in the middle, which, threads the needle and gets both aspects right, where it's non-custodial, you can't rug the user, but you still get the kind of world-class user experience that you expect from a modern application and not this like janky thin client craziness, which again, doesn't even solve for like the Aave instance you could take down. It's just running in AWS. Like let's not pretend that there isn't like a credit card tied to a server, and if you took that thing down, it's gone, right? Same thing with DNS. Like we still, like DNS is still the gatekeeper of all of these things, right? So, there are all of these like, trust me, bro, don't look over here problems that we've kind of hand waved away. And meanwhile, like just like absolutely thrash the user with like horrible UX for years because we were forced into doing this LARPing, pretending to be censorship
Yeah.
resistant.
Like why even play that game instead of just doing it like flipping the script, as you said, and just focusing on the user first, and then kind of crossing the chasm of being, immutable and unstoppable after, right?
The reality is that users have just gone onto Binance.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
because it's
we
too
haven't
hard.
made it better. We've made it worse. Like that approach.
We made it worse.
Right.
Yeah. It's so much of UX ends up actually being about like this kind of combination of education and safety, right? Like UX is don't make me think. Don't make me learn how to do a weird thing. Don't make me feel like at risk when I'm doing it. Like just make it obvious and easy. And when I do the obvious thing, it turns out to be the right thing. Like that's what really good UX is. And then you get to like, is it fast? Is it responsive? Those are all kind of built on top of that foundation of like, does what is happening match the user's intuitive mental model? Because most people aren't gonna spend the time learning the nuances of a weird thing. Like, and I think if we can do that in a way, like what Kane's alluding to as well, is we don't want to block any of the potential to sort of implement something that is genuinely not just like our path of being non-custodial means that you can have stuff that is genuinely censorship resistant as like the backstop behind it, right? Like even if the front end for Aave disappears, you can, if you know what you're doing, you can still go on chain, you can still do those things, right? And like you couldn't do that if Binance was your back end.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've talked about this before, but the reason why we kept going down this path is incentives. It's always incentives, right? The incentives were enthusiasts are the ones who are buying tokens. Do what the enthusiasts want, which is like maximally censorship resistance LARPing, right? And you get the prize. And so everyone did that, right? And like we've boxed ourselves into a corner, right? Like we're in a part of the solution space where we can't get out of. We need to back away slowly from that corner and like go to a different part of the solution space. Like this is not the thing we were looking for, right? Like there's no end game here, right? Like we're not taking down Binance in this corner of the solution space. We need to go back our way back out of the maze. We're at a dead end and try a different part of the maze.
Yeah, 2 steps forward, or 2 steps back, 1 step forward. And I think that what we saw, and Ken, we were talking about this in Brussels, is we saw a lot of like technical innovations like Uniswap V2, then V3, then we saw different types of lending markets. And all of these things were like prioritized on marginal improvements across the on-chain usage of DeFi from like the pure numbers perspective of like optimizing for capital efficiency, right? We heard that term so much in 2020 and 2021 and still do. But like the idea of actually optimizing for making this simple was just, completely pushed to the side because, well, frankly, the financial incentive and the economic incentive to operate in the system that was so poor was still so high. So it was like, well,
Exactly.
I don't really care. But things have changed significantly due to market sophistication, more teams, more tokens, et cetera.
It's more
Right. So,
competitive. Like the
right.
landscape's more competitive, and it's also saturated. We've sucked the air out of the room, right? Like there's no more enthusiasts, really, right? And in fact, like it's actually worse than that. I've been saying for a while, like we ran out of enthusiasts. Not only do we run out of enthusiasts, we actually drove the enthusiasts away. The enthusiasts got tired of this. They're like, this is fucking nonsense. I don't want to deal with this shit anymore. They're not transacting on chain anymore. They're just like sitting on a pile of tokens and, waiting for the next bull market. Yeah, in Aave or something, right? Like they stopped experimenting. They stopped, it just became too dangerous, too painful, too annoying. People got tired, right? So I think it's not just that we ran out of enthusiasts. I think the old enthusiasts need to be reactivated. Like we can
I agree
reactivate the
completely.
OG on-chain people. Like we can back on-chain again and be like, God, like they're going to be the easy. There's actually another audience, like before we even get to Binance, of like OG yield farming people that were like, hey guys, like you can actually come and just click a button and play the same games, right? Like, we're stuck in Atari land. Meanwhile, like, everyone's playing Call of Duty on their like, crazy gaming
Binance
box, right?
perps thing.
Yeah, literally, right? Like, and it's
Yeah.
like, okay,
Or
like,
prediction market or whatever. Okay, so I want to get into some of the Infinex kind of tech as well as the patron stuff, but I just want to close the loop as to kind of how exactly our community should be thinking about in Infinex. And so I put out a tweet several months back, I believe, and it was like, when will we have one single UX that aggregates all of DeFi across all chains, that gives me the best liquidity across all venues? It sources it for me through some sort of like solvers or some sort of technology where I can just come to one place and I can get the best rates, the best yields, and kind of in this ultimate aggregator. And so I'm starting to kind of think of like Infinex as this like ultimate aggregator of DeFi, not aggregated in the same sense as like Paraswap or 1inch, but aggregation of everything that we have in the space today across multiple chains into one place where I can get the best liquidity, yields, opportunities in an easy to use UX. Is that the right way to kind of think about it? Do you guys have access to like all the chains, some of the chains, all the dApps? Is there a focus? And kind of is Infinex just like the ultimate on-chain aggregator effectively? Or is that just bad marketing?
It's a good question. We've talked about this a bit internally from time to time, like, are we an aggregator? Right. And there's multiple answers to that. Sometimes the answer is like, no, we're not, because you're thinking about it like 1inch. I do think that we end up being almost an aggregator of aggregators, right? Like I think our job at the top of the stack is to be the interface for users. And so we want to expose as much as possible of what DeFi is to users. And some of that will become that we just surface all these options, right? And whether that's users whether that's helping educate users on like, should I go into Athena? Is that the best place for me to get some stablecoin yield this month? Or should I do something else? Even if I'm in Athena, right? Like, am I doing some weird Pendle thing? Or am I just holding USDE? Like, and I'm getting kind of different yield and different incentives for those. So like, we want to surface some of that. We don't want to kind of take responsibility for DeFi. We want to make it accessible. So we start sort of talking about this like maybe 80-20 rule where like 80% of people looking for yield are only going to use 20% of what Athena are doing. And we want that in Infinex. We want that to be like in our app. Eventually, we also want to have a really good answer for like the other 20% of people who want the other 80% of the complexity that you can get in all the different kinds of pools and setups and different strategies that Athena can sort of expose you to. And we want people to be able to kind of seamlessly move between the stuff that we're really surfacing and all of the other stuff that you can do. And kind of eventually try and wrap all of this together, in and outside of Infinex in a better user experience and a safer way of interacting on chain. And so it may not be like, when we talk about aggregation, it may not just be like automated aggregation. It's definitely not like within one chain, like, the sort of aggregation that was started in the space. So I'm really depends on like how you want to interpret that concept, but I think our goal is to sit at that top layer, where we're making this stuff accessible to people without like kind of creating this like concrete floor that people can't then break through to get into the rest of it.
Safe is moving the world's GDP on-chain. With the introduction of SafeNet, Safe is taking this to the next step very soon. Check out net.safe.global to learn more about how Safe is moving the world's GDP on-chain.
Welcome aboard on our journey into the singularity. This is the endgame roadmap for Frax and Fraxtal, the new L2 out of the Frax ecosystem that is totally based on fractal scaling. Fraxtal is a modular L2 blockchain built by Frax with modular and fractal scaling in mind. Fractal scaling is based on the Mandelbrot set of fractal images, and it explains how L2s become L3s and the entire app chain lifecycle goes through its evolution. The Frax ecosystem is made of some of the top builders in the space and has stemmed from its OG days of the Frax stablecoin. It is now in the LST space, the LRT space, and this Fraxtal L2 joins the existing suite of Frax products, including Frax Swap and Frax Lend. You can see Frax Ferry, the bridge to go from any chain, Arbitrum, Optimism, or mainnet into the Fraxtal mainnet. Bridge your tokens and bring your Frax assets into the Fraxtal ecosystem. Join today to get the best out of Fraxtal. You are still early. Join today. Take part in our expedition into the singularity.
Redstone modular oracles are available on 50 plus chains, trusted by over 100 clients and over 6 billion in total value secured. Visit redstone.finance to find out more.
Cool. Appreciate that. Really good understanding. And I think that's going to be helpful for the community to get, right? And also, ironically, I think the line between apps and infrastructure is completely going to be blurred over the next, it's already happening with like app chains and kind of, people just deciding that they don't want to be an app on a general purpose chain, and then kind of moving even into this direction, right, where Infinex becomes like this this app that people use that's powered by all this crypto infrastructure that is already there, and so that that is already kind of the blurred line. All right, guys, so $65 million raised, 40,000 patrons. I see Kain at the Mega ETH Infinex party in Singapore. We're having some drinks. And I'm like, dude, I've got to ape. He's like, man, it's too late. I'm like, no, I think I've got like 7 more hours. My business partner, Rob, and co-host, who unfortunately is asleep, he sends me some USDC to the Infinex app. I'm at like some table at a club that night, had like a lot of drinks. I'm aping the patrons. You guys are tweeting about it. All of crypto Twitter's tweeting about it. And you guys did something new, right? And I think that was the biggest breakthrough. So before we get deep into like kind of how that all worked, and I know that the launch is just in a couple of days, so we'll try to time this right and get that out right around the launch. But like, what was your inspiration for doing things this way? Are you a believer in this kind of like myriad thesis of VC coins, FTV float? Like how deep are you in this idea that the public should have equal access and that we should do things in a completely new way than the previous token launches?
I mean, I'm deep down that rabbit hole, and I've always been there, right? Like, and this is kind of the sad thing over the last like maybe 3 or 4 years is like it's benefited me that you have these very tightly held seed rounds and people are looking for angels. I just got a message right as I was about to jump on this podcast where someone's like, hey, we just closed our round, but we really want you as an angel. And it's like, hang on a second. There's like this round is closed, right? You've wrapped it up. You've got the right VCs, whatever. And now you're like going and gathering up some angels for Signal or whatever. Like that, like I got it wrong. If this deal is so good, I should have known about it, right? If this were an ICO and the person sent me a DM being like, it should be like, hey, our ICO's over. You're a fucking idiot for missing it. Instead, it's like, hey, would you like to come in the back door? And like, it's just bad. It's bad. It's not good for anyone. It's misalignment. And like, again, everyone's responding to the incentives, right? So the project goes out and gets VCs, and then they go and gather up some angels, and they're like, hey, we're doing, and sometimes it's like, hey, we're even going to give the angels a discount against the VCs, right? It's like playing them off against each other. But like, what about everyone else? It's just bad. It's bad. And, we're in this inadequate equilibrium right now that no one can break out of because the incentives have just boxed us into this place where we've got to play these dumb games, right? And the bigger problem is when you play it out, it ends up in this low float, high FDV meta, right? Which is bad for everyone, bad for the project, bad for, normal people, bad for your average DGen, right? And so I was like, look, one of the things that I think crypto does a bad job of sometimes is like we do good things and we discover good things and then we get bored of them. And like NFT mints were a thing that I think, even over ICOs, right? Like did a really good job of kind of gating access, giving, being like fair, equal access to people, etc. They did a really good job of that. And so I was like, what is the thing in terms of token distribution that, over the last 5 years has done a really good job of kind of satisfying these conditions of like wide distribution and alignment and fairness and, equal access. And it's probably NFT mints. Like crypto punks were just sitting there. You can mint them for free for like months, right? I never bothered. I was like, it seems dumb. Like, whatever, Meanwhile, like Eric Connor is like YOLO minting like 50 crypto punks, right? So like he wins that game. But like I was there, I had the chance, I didn't do it for reasons, I didn't get it, whatever, right? And so I think that I looked at that and I was like, an NFT mint is the best thing that we have at the moment of like aligning a community, right? And also it creates this dynamic where like you have to get it, right? It's not easy. You have to get it. It's a bit weird, right? It's not something that like everyone's going to just immediately get in FOMO into, right? We could have done like a meme coin launch. That like seriously, like we could have done that, right? We could have been like, we're going to launch an Infinex meme coin. We're going to put it on Pump Fun, and it would have been bad. Like it would have been bad. It would have got sniped. It would have been PvP. It would have been, it would have like just the whole thing. Like, so the current meta, like there's different, solutions, right? Like the VC seed rounds, meme coin launches, like most of them are kind of dumb and bad in various ways, right? NFT mints, at least, the classical style NFT mint, it works. It's a good distribution mechanism. And it had this advantage of being like a little bit obscure, a little bit weird. Which gives people a chance to like figure it out.
But Ken, they were minted. If you look at the token supply versus the pricing on the mints, they're also between 125 million FTV and like 500 million FTV. So like, are you going to have to launch this thing? Are you worried that like people are going to be down? Are you thinking about like token launch? Like you still raised quite high, right? Like it was still not a cheap round by any means.
It wasn't a cheap round, but look, I guess, if we're pricing things, right? Like if we're like, okay, Infinex was somewhere between and again, an NFT doesn't have an FTV exactly, but collection value, whatever you want to call it, right? It's worth between 100 mil and 500 mil or something, right? Okay. when I did the Haven ICO, the FTV was like 70 million. And, that kind of worked out fine for everyone, right? Like the actual, it was like, so I think, my view is that like, if you want to do something that's open and fair and genuinely available to everyone, right? It has to be priced in a way that like everyone can get in. Otherwise you just have a tiny door, right? And it's like a lottery, which doesn't really help. Like, and it's actually worse.
Yeah, it
This
makes
is the other
sense.
thing, right? If you look at the NFT mints that went really poorly, and I like crypto is so adversarial that if you miss out on something, like if you had passed out under the table at that club instead of
I was close,
being,
man. I was close.
they were close, right? Like if you had just fallen asleep an hour early, right, and you missed out, your incentive is not just to be like, oh, oops, I missed out. Your incentive is to try and like burn Infinex to the ground, right? Now you're like in the FUD army of Infinex. You're like, Infinex psyops, is a scam, like shut this thing down. Seriously, like that, like it's true, right? Like this is the behavior of everyone, right? And you'll be like looking for the Infinex killer, like every person missed Solana, right? It's like, okay, Sui is going to be the next, Solana for reasons, right? Move, whatever. Like, and it's like, this is like, it's such an adversarial environment. It's not just like, oh, I missed out. Good luck to them. It's like they must die. I'm going to kill them, right? And so if you create an environment where like you have this tiny little door and it's a lottery ticket where like 1 in 50 people get in, that's bad too, right? So I guess the question is like, what do we think a thing that is going to take down Binance is worth? I don't know, dude, but it's like not
Yeah.
$100 million.
And
right?
the thing is
Like,
also, if you also give the initial, however many days post token launch, weeks, if it's not launched at an egregious valuation, the people can also just buy on the secondary and have a similar community upside as somebody who's locked, right?
yeah, for sure. And this is the other thing, right? It's like, I think there's something like 5% of the supply was given out through like yield farming and some airdrops and stuff. So those people have zero cost basis, right? So they don't really care. Like they could sell at $1,000, 500, 100, whatever, So there's a very decent chance that like that supply that people farmed, which helped to create awareness of Infinex, right? Like that's worth it. It's marketing spend, if you will, right?
Definitely.
If those people, all turn up and like dump it to like, $1,500 or 2K or something like that, like that's bullish in my mind, right? Like it means that people are getting a better entry. Like I'm kind of okay with that. Like
Got
not
to encourage dumping.
Not to encourage dumping, but like it's sort of like sell me all the patrons that you've got at 2K and fuck off.
And fuck off.
Right? Like, so like, like I'm okay with that.
Okay, so in by the time this is out, again, hopefully in the day after this patron launch will have happened, which means the patrons have been distributed, investing has started. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean that like the Infinex token is out, or that like the platform is going to be evolved in some way such that there's more usage? Like, what does this launch signify?
Yeah, we've got some ideas for what patrons can do, right? Like we sort of wanted to have them and then we can figure out, what to do with them. Obviously we have decentralized governance and there's already a proposal to switch governance once the patron's live to Patron NFTs. That kind of makes sense. Like it's the thing that, everyone bought to show their alignment with Infinex. So, probably should govern the platform. So I think that's one thing that will happen. Another thing is, probably some like Infinex perks, and I think exchanges do a really good job of this. Like BNB has like differential discounts if you're staking BNB, and you get like Binance Launchpad stuff, and so if you hold your patrons in your Infinex account, and one kind of hint towards this direction is there's a plan, I think, to launch like a competition for 3 people who are holding their patrons in their Infinex account to go to DevCon, to get like an all expenses paid trip to go to DevCon, right? So it's like, hey, there's gonna be some like weird little perks, like go to DevCon, go to Breakpoint maybe or something.
So for the people that minted, it's not just a financial thing. There could be other community incentives alongside this, or other kind of out of the traditional, like I invest X, I get Y, kind of vested over amount of time. That's like obviously like the primary bootstrapping use case for the community, but you guys are also game planning kind of other ways.
Yeah, I can
To make
imagine
it-
community incentives. I can also imagine like in-app features, right? So like one of the things we've got at the moment is like Infinex is paying all the gas for anything that you can do on chain through Infinex. We're
Super
covering
bullish.
gas. And one of the things that means is that on Ethereum will give you, I think it's 3 swaps a day is like current cap. And that's just because it's expensive on the L1. And it's not even really about not wanting to pay the gas of people who are using the platform genuinely. It's also about not wanting to just open the door to all the people who are going to, come in and like, well, those Infinex butters that Kain was just talking about. I don't want them coming up and just like mashing the swap button all day. And like, that's not going to work out well for anyone. So, maybe there's something like if you're holding a patron in your account, you get upper limits on stuff. We ran another campaign as an earlier part of launch season, which was speedrun the waitlist, so that as we start rolling out integrations in integration season, we have a way to like order accounts by who was in early and who, kind of should get access to maybe features when we're in like small group testing stages of rollout, stuff like that. And I think eventually over the long term, like it'd be really nice for the patron to have utility in the platform in terms of like, all right, you've shown alignment with us. You've shown that you're supporting, helping us build what we're building. And it's good for you to get access to the things that we've built, or higher limits. Like you kind of, almost like the centralized exchanges do with VIP. This, like Kain said, that works out quite well, I think. And so there's a lot of stuff like that where just, if you're holding a patron, you're a very real user to us. You're not just like someone who's shown up sibling and stuff like that.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think you guys could even look into using like a ZK coprocessor integration to facilitate much more personalization of Infinex. So you can get, you can use users' data from other applications, other on-chain metrics, trends, et cetera, and really kind of like maybe do like some like personalization of that platform, kind of like a centralized exchange does. I think that would be a really cool UX feature as well. From the patron perspective, I have 2 main questions, and then just kind of want to on the tech side, and then just kind of looking ahead as we wrap up. My first one is, this was the first time I've ever done anything on chain that has my Face ID, and that I've used this kind of passkey for. So I thought that was pretty cool, and also very easy to set up. But like the on-chain, my name Andy with a penguin, I was also like, what information is Kain getting from me with this Face ID? So like, how does this passkey work with Turnkey? How are you guys ensuring that this data is safe? And why was this the selection that you guys made, and kind of, pushing this forward?
I've got a 3D model of your face now on my desk.
It's just like right above where you sleep, right?
Yeah, literally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning on revealing it this early, but this whole thing is just a backdoor to basically build a giant worldwide database of people's faces. That's
awesome.
I guess now that's out, we're done, Kain, we can go. No, like that, we're not... Infinex didn't scan your face. Your operating system did, right? Your operating system then unlocked a private, like a private key that's stored inside your device's secure enclave, and used that to sign something that we sent you, and then you sent that back. Like, that's just your operating system acting like a Trezor, And so we basically say, we need to know that it's you. We need to know that your device has told us that that's you. And so, the implementation varies depending on what passkey ecosystem you're in. Apple do it one way, Google do it one way, 1Password does it another way. And like we've learned a lot over the last 6 months about the different ways in which this sort of plays out in some of these different ecosystems. Like, pro tip, don't use Windows Hello to store your Infinex passkey. But
or Linux. Linux doesn't do it at all. Linux is like
that's
not doing passkey.
Definitely don't put it on a YubiKey, right? Like, I'm here to tell you that you can find ways to do that, and you should absolutely not. But like, it's a thing that you hold that is really hard for you to lose. It's really hard for you to lose, and it's almost impossible for anyone to take it from you, because
So
it's
if
built
I
into your.
lose my phone that I have here, as long as I can sign into my Apple ID, or even just like, so do I just need to sign into my Apple ID to be able to access Infinex again? Or like, do I just need to have my face?
You need to like, so, and this is, again, there's some nuance here, right? If you've got your iCloud security set up to a certain level, then they will let you use like Apple's, what's it called? Keychain sync with iCloud. Right, so
Yep.
keychain sync is the technology that Apple built that is actually facilitating the synchronization of that. And if you turn on the right features, even Apple can't decrypt that for you. Right? Like if you lose your iCloud password, then and you lose the way they've implemented 2FA across devices, like all of that stuff, like you're done there. Don't do that. But it's also, Apple are very good at this game. You know, they've been at it for years. They're very good at both security and user-centric safety. In fact, I'd say like they're probably the best company in the world that understands this connection between UX and safety that we've been talking about. Right. So we've got these ecosystems that are doing a really good job of helping people kind of be safe. And it's not just in crypto, like that's your net banking, right?
Yep.
It's all this other stuff. Like Web 2 honestly got really good at some of this stuff. And then if you look at it, it's actually almost like a bit of crypto in Web 2, right? Because like it's just a PKP at the end of the day. The whole WebAuthn standard, like you can do attestations with it, right? You've got a private key that's never leaving a device. We can give you a challenge, you sign that, you send it back. What we're doing with in the middle, which we're using Turnkey for, is just the abstraction layer where we can take a signature from a passkey using WebAuthn, and we can turn that into a signature that can be sort of natively validated on chain, right? And you've
On
got
any chain.
yeah, I mean, there are different encryption curves that different chains support. So we can sign a Solana transaction, we can sign an Ethereum transaction. If we wanted to, we could sign a Bitcoin transaction, and we'll go there. And like that's kind of the key to self-custody for us. That plus the smart contract infrastructure, right? Because like you've got the smart contract, which is guaranteeing that you can recover. If you do lose your passkey, you have set a recovery address and you can eject your funds to that address. And so this is kind of an important part of it as well. Basically, we looked at it and we said, okay, your passkey is your self-custodial thing that you hold, and that gates your access to most on-chain transactions. If you lose that though, we want to have things that are lower severity to like, not lower severity, like they're kind of easier for someone to get. Like I'd say maybe access to your Gmail login is easier to get than like your Face ID on your phone, right? It's just like, it's just not quite gated the same way. And again, this depending on how you set up. And there's stuff that's even easier, like the number of Facebook IDs that get stolen annually is a ridiculous number. So we don't support Facebook at all as a social auth to unlock your recovery. We tried to pick like the right things that kind of everyone has versus are really secure. Or if you're on chain and you've been on chain for a while, you can opt out of social recovery. You can do nothing that's going to dox yourself, and you just use an EOA to sign a transaction. So we've got these different options, right? But all they can do is eject your funds to an address that's been pre-agreed before your account had any value. So like you show up with Infinex, it's got no value in it. You're going to tell us what your escape hatch is. Right? You then deposit $100 million, and without your passkey, you can't do anything with that, right? So there's kind of like other ways that people can kind of lose access to stuff. Like we've got lower severity stuff, but the only thing you can do with that is send it to the pre-agreed escape hatch. Right? So we can kind of make that more accessible. And so it's really been a blended sort of model the way we've approached this this security piece. But yeah, it's, I guess, back to your original question, Turnkey is that translation layer for us, where we can sort of get you to sign with your passkey and then translate that into a signature for the transaction that you intended to sign. And we can't get in the middle of that. We don't have like a back end that can just sign on your behalf. It requires sort of that multi-party process for us to then be able to have a transaction that you've signed that we can land on chain for you.
Yep. And you actually hit on my kind of next question as well, which was around kind of the recovery process. Again, like for patrons, like if I somehow lose my passkey, I have like this other Trezor connected as like this backup. So in the event that a patron loses or somebody who has funds on the platform loses their passkey, they can go and initiate a funds recovery process that would just send their funds back to that wallet address, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
And then, but how would I initiate that process if I don't have my passkey?
We've got 3 options at the moment. Like if you've connected your Apple account, you can just sign in with Apple. If you've connected your Google account, sign in with Google. All right. And again, like the way Apple challenges you, you're going to get kind of probably a stronger challenge to unlock your keychain sync than you are to just sign in with Google. And this is very much a thing that everyone can kind of set up in accordance with their own personal preferences, and everyone's kind of got a different posture with these major providers. But those are our 2 sort of social recovery options. And then, like it sounds like you would have added your EOA for your Trezor as a signer as well. And so, if we weren't around, you could just go to the contract and you can sign a transaction with your Trezor, and you can get that. Like that's another method that we've got available for you to eject your funds from your Infinex account if you've lost your passkey.
Got it. Cool. I feel like this is better by far than the traditional seed phrase with hardware wallet. So I think that was the goal, right? I mean, it just felt way easier to like sign up,
Yeah, we do too. And there's trade-offs, of course, right? But like,
yeah, like you have my face picture.
Exactly. The 3D model of your face that sits on my desk. There's trade-offs with everything. Always, technology is about trade-offs. But I think that like tech gets better. Like this idea of like you need a seed phrase. It's like we tried to do this a while ago. Like Argent, like people knew that this was not going well years ago and tried to fix it, tried to do things. Dharma, there are a bunch of wallets that try to do it, and it's just like the wallet. And Jed has a lot to say about this, but like the wallet alone can't fix this.
Yeah, like something else that I'll say is, one of my favorite attacks that I've seen this year in crypto is turned out a bunch of Android apps in the Google Play Store were just recording screens, right? Like screenshot every 30 seconds of whatever's on the screen. And so if you had installed one of these apps literally and like somehow just pointed your Android phone at your, like with the camera and at your seed phrase, which you've only ever written on paper, by the way, right? It's just taking pictures and constantly uploading them to an S3 bucket somewhere. It's then OCRing all this stuff and looking for anything that looks like a seed phrase, and they're draining people's wallets. Like the stuff we think is safe is so deeply not safe once you really get into all of the implications of the different ways in which people get wrecked. And that's before we get into how much of a lie blind signing makes everything we do in DeFi, which I could probably do a whole podcast around that. But it's hard to stay safe in crypto. Really, like what my Trezor is doing, and don't get me wrong, I love my Trezor, and I kind of like the idea of maybe one day being able to also plug that in as a second factor to my Infinex account, right? But really, like what this is doing is something very similar. There's, I've got a secret private key in here, and I've got a way to unlock and sign a transaction with it that can then sign a transaction in my Infinex account, right? This is a really good hardware wallet. It's a really good hardware wallet. And I don't even know that it's happening. As a user, I'm like, oh, it's just, there's the Face ID and I'm in. And I can't lose it, because if I just throw this at a brick wall, like it's in my iCloud, but that's secured by other private keys that I am self-custodial of, right? It's like, this is actually, stuff got pretty good here. So it's nice to start actually being able to use that.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 biggest problem spaces that I see Infinex basically tackling is this wallet infrastructure side. I think this, while it may seem like the focus for trading and for a better UX of actually using the app, I think the entire sign up process and the way that we've explained how it works is light years ahead of the seed phrase era. So I think that hopefully this sets a trend in that direction. And then I think obviously the actual UX of kind of an aggregator of aggregators of sorts, or a place to get the enthusiasts excited again about DeFi is in my books. It's the important part of the app, but like the wallet side breakthrough here, I think, is what a lot of people have probably commented on already who have signed up as patrons, and I think who will continue as you guys grow.
Yeah, I think the key is like, it's both nicer to use and it's also better. You know, two of the other great attacks that we've seen a lot of this year, one is domains get stolen all the time. Like there was that Squarespace huge domain surface area attack. And you know, if you got our domain, you could use that to unlock passkeys, but then you couldn't do anything with them, right? Because the passkey is not actually signing the on-chain transaction, right? You need our private backend keys to actually get into turnkey to start unlocking things. Like you kind of need to attack so many different things at once here. There's no kind of single point of failure. And then another, if you registered infinexisgreat.com and managed to get a bunch of Infinex users to it, like they couldn't unlock their passkeys there. It's phishing resilient. Like it really just, it kind of gets like entire categories of threats and just like nopes them out of the picture. Which is, and it's nicer to use. Like it's just like, well, that's cool.
All right, guys. Well, I mean, last thing here, I'm on the Infinex app on my phone right now. There's home, wallet, earn, play, and obviously like my patron stuff, speed run, crate run. So I can play bull run today, and it says trade is coming soon. We haven't really talked that much specifically about the development of the product itself. So I'd like to just kind of end on that note. What is the product roadmap looking like, going into 2025? And what are the key features that you guys want to ship, priorities, and kind of like rough timeline there?
I think that this is one of the challenges, right? That like, again, Jed and I have been speaking about this a lot, is we built the original architecture. You know, when Jed joined the project last year in whatever it was, like October or November or something like that, you know, we had this architectural idea in mind, and it was very aligned to like the dogma, let's call it, like DeFi dogma, right? The religion of DeFi. And, you know, Jed turned up and was like, yeah, some of this is nonsense, but like, you know, I'll play along for a while, right? And I think that we've now built enough and we've seen enough of like where this architecture gets us. And we've actually been through like a whole iteration cycle of this architecture. And this is a novel architecture, right? Like no one's ever tried to do it this way before. And we've gone through like V0, maybe like V.5 of that. And we're sort of sitting here today going, we can keep grinding on this, or we can really like learn the lessons of the last year and re-architect it to speed up our ability to integrate and unlock some of these other things. And that's currently the tension right now, is like how much re-architecting versus just, you know, pushing along do we do? Because, you know, there's this fairly harsh trade-off of like, do we spend a couple months like rebuilding some of this stuff the right way to then allow us to like really accelerate, or do we, you know, keep running in parallel, upgrade the back end while we're, you know, kind of going along in the front end? There's an open question at the moment, I guess.
All right, Kain, the DJs just want to know when they can trade, man.
You know what's funny is if this gives anyone confidence, right? We have a bunch of DJs in the team, and they're like, "Shut the fuck up with your architectural nonsense. Like, when can I trade?" Like literally, I was talking to one of the engineers yesterday, and he's like, "You just keep rugging us. Let us trade. Let us build a trading interface." Like, and so yeah, there are internal advocates, let's just say, for the external DJs out there. You've got plants inside the org who are pushing hard for trading. So I like the honest answer is like probably like early next year. I think trading will go live. It's just a question of like, is it trading plus like 20 other things, or is it just trading?
Yeah, I think it would be cool as you guys roll that out to also write some of this into like a blog post, right? As to the thinking, right? I think that kind of the crux of the conversation, I think, Kain, you said, between this like Binance edge of full custody, best experience versus like what we have on chain, full censorship resistance, kind of like scoping out that gradient, and then, you know, explaining your thoughts as you guys come to that choice, I think could influence a lot of builders to think in the better way of basically UX first, right? And so would love to see something like that from your end, and, you know, obviously excited for the trading stuff too. So guys, thanks for coming on. It's been a great conversation. I think we covered A to Z here. It's been a pleasure.
Right.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you.
Thank you.